welcome to Manor Hill Productions Live, the webinar focusing on the live event industry. During this COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to use this as an opportunity to stay in touch with each other, learn a little bit more about the live event industry, which is currently in pause, just for a little while, hopefully not much longer. And this way, when it all is over, you can go back to business, having learned a little bit more and have a better, stronger industry because of it. During the webinar today, don't forget to click on the comment bubble in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Did I get this right? Yeah, I always mess it up. The upper left-hand corner of your screen, click on the comment bubble with questions you might have for our panelists about the topic or suggestions for how we might make the webinar better and cover some things that you'd like to hear more about. In the industry spotlight this week, I'd like to talk about our friends 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is the largest convenience store in the world and a client of Manor Hill Productions and a business partner. We've done a lot of work with them over the years, and it's been a great relationship. We're really excited to celebrate something they've done this past week, where they have set up a temporary pop-up 7-Eleven store inside Children's Medical Center, Dallas. And it's full of groceries, paper towels, toilet paper, phone chargers, laundry detergent, some of the basics and some of the essentials that people need. And again, it's inside, as you can see it here, it's inside Children's Medical Center, Dallas. So this is a great way for patients who are there, people who are visiting those patients, and especially the healthcare professionals who are making such a big difference during this pandemic to have access to some of those necessary items. And we appreciate 7-Eleven for doing that. We celebrate them. That was a great idea. And the one that they've installed, the pop-up at Children's Medical Center, Dallas, maybe that's just the first one. Hopefully we'll hear more about them doing that in other locations. So thank you, 7-Eleven. We appreciate that. We appreciate your being a good neighbor and a great partner. So on with the show. Today's webinar is Event Photography in Focus. We'll play on words. We'd like to welcome our two panelists today. Larry Young is a photographer based in North Texas. Larry Young Photography. He's had several years of experience with photography as an event photographer for conferences, print publications, as well as corporate and entertainment events. But today we're talking about Larry's experience with live event photography. So Larry, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. We're also talking to Mike Buscher. Mike, you're in the northeastern part of the country, right?
That's correct. I'm just outside of Baltimore City.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us via the miracle of the internet. Mike brings a wealth of diversity to our discussion today with more than 10 years experience as a photojournalist for USA Today, New York Daily News, just to name a couple. He's worked corporate events, weddings, sporting events. I'm sure you have to take a few pictures at family events. Is that true? Are you guys, whenever there's a family event, is like, hey, grab Larry and Mike, we got to take pictures. Do you ever get a break?
Oh, all the time. We're always recruited to do something like that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so thanks for joining us and bringing your experience to the webinar.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Good, thanks. So let's begin with just general topics. When we're talking about event photography, and this is for live events and primarily corporate events, let's start with how do you know what to do? Let's talk about the importance of a shot list. You arrive, you got your gear, the client is there, they're hard to track down. I've seen it before, they're running a million different directions and you're like, hey, where do I take a picture of? So this kind of goes without saying, is it a good idea to establish a shot list with the client in advance, Larry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's my lifeblood. If I didn't have a detailed shot list, then I don't know where to go, what time to be there, and what I'm looking for. So if I don't have that, then I'm lost in walking around a convention center or a corporate event, because I need to have that detailed breakdown so that I know where to be and what the client is looking for. So yes, it's everything for me.
Yeah, that's really helpful because, you know, I've even heard this. Sometimes the client will just say to the photographer, well, just get everything. Just get a picture of everything.
Correct.
In theory, yeah, sure, you can get everything, but there's a schedule. There's certain things happen at certain times. Mike, what's your experience with the necessity of a shot list?
It's crucial. I mean, communication is key, and the earlier in the process it starts, the better. So if I can get that shot list a day, a two, a week ahead of time, I've had a chance to look it over, ask my questions, and then show up really prepared. Without the shot list, we're kind of just flying blind, and we'll get some stuff, but we may miss something crucial, and it won't be the client's fault that we miss it. It'll be our fault. But it was never told to us to shoot it, so it's really helpful to know these things ahead of time.
Yeah, sure. The photographer, and I've witnessed this. They're like, after everything is over and we're looking where are the pictures, that's really important. Before that, the photographer is kind of like, because it's been my experience that photographers are usually pretty self-reliant, industrious, and can be left to their own devices. So because of that, people tend to like not worry about it. But the photographer and the photography just kind of, it almost becomes something that people just assume is going to be there. Mike, you were telling me you have an experience with there was an awards night, and all of a sudden the people who were getting their pictures taken on stage, no flash bulbs were going off.
That's right.
What happened with that?
So they were posing for photos, but there was nobody actually taking the photos. So it was a little awkward for those involved. I was there photographing the event in a different capacity, sort of behind the scenes photography. And someone came running up to me to ask if I could cover the award photos as well, and I happily did so. I think we missed the first group, but we got the second group, the third group, the fourth group, and after the event, we ended up staging the first group so that the client was happy with that, and they were very grateful. Sometimes, the client has so much on their mind. They're like you were saying before, Bill. They were really running in 10 different directions. So, they might overlook the fact that there's no photographer in the room, and that's just sometimes we are an afterthought.
Yeah, that's just to illustrate, they'd just forgotten to hire someone, and they were posing for pictures that weren't being taken.
Exactly.
We did talk about the chaos of when you first get there, and something that's just sort of something that's nice to put on the checklist and try to remember to do. Larry, do you ever have trouble when you first get there? You're ready to take pictures of things going, and no one's thought to give you a badge. Is that something that you found is kind of good to figure out where do I show up? Who do I get my badge from?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Depending, and especially now in today's time, especially after 9/11 and whatnot, when you're in a convention center, the security is pretty tight, especially in a major city like Washington or New York or Orlando, wherever it is, it's pretty tight. So that's really, you have to be real critical in respect of and my clients now understand that I've got to get my hands on a badge so I can move around, and I have to be able to move around without being stopped, because if I'm trying to get from A to B, I'm going through shortcuts and back areas and hallways and kitchens and all that kind of stuff just to get to where I need to be. And the last thing I need to do is have someone stop me and say, you can't go this way because you don't have the right badge.
Right.
It's all about the badges.
Mm.
Yeah, and a lot of times the people who are in charge of getting you the badge they got their hands full, and they're not answering their cell phone. You're trying to get in touch with them. So yeah, any opportunity to work that out in advance is great. Something else to work out in advance is, and just to make clear, is what the delivery schedule is going to be on the photographs. Mike, why is that vital?
Well, the client might have expectations that are not realistic. If we're shooting thousands of images, that means hours in front of the computer after the fact, doing post-production work, culling, editing, color corrections, that kind of thing. So if they want 24-hour turnaround, depending on the event, it may or may not be realistic. So it's good to talk about that kind of thing ahead of time, just to make sure everybody has the same level of expectations.
Larry?
Absolutely. You'll ask your client a lot of times, and Mike and I were chatting beforehand, when do you want your photographs? It's like, well, take your time, just whenever you can get to them, which usually means Tuesday of the next week. And then when you say, oh, you mean Tuesday, it's like, oh that'd be perfect. So yeah, you have to be realistic. And Mike is right. In some of these events, you're shooting thousands and thousands of images. You got a lot of files to go through. You got to look at all the files. You got to put all the files away, and you got to get them all categorized and cataloged and all that kind of fun stuff. And it takes time. And you just can't, with technology, you can certainly edit pretty quickly, but you've got to spend the time to go through each and every file. And you got to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mike and I both do the best we can, but you have to be realistic.
It's also a good idea to talk to the client in advance and find out what the picture is going to be used for. Because
Correct.
sometimes you're taking pictures and suddenly they go, okay, great, send those to whoever because they're going to go in our web publication that's put in under everyone's hotel door tomorrow morning. Or I say web publication, print publication. Or, you know, they're going to be, you know, we want them on the website tonight. So so when and where they're going are kind of two different sides of the same coin.
Well, the dynamic is changing with respect to what you're using the files or the images for. And social media, as we all know, is such a huge deal that initially when I first got into event photography, it was for documentation, and they kind of put them somewhere, and that's as far as, you know, a lot of times never saw the light of day. Well, nowadays, a lot of these associations have social media experts on staff, and they want they want images to post. It's all about posting on your Instagrams and your Facebooks and all the various platforms. So part of your job, and Mike certainly we've chatted about this also, during the course of your day, you kind of have to make time to stop and send them those files, because that's an active thing that's going on nonstop. And that's part of their job. You know, we've got a job, that's their job, is to provide them those images.
Okay. Well, those are some of the general things to talk about, general topics for photography. But let's talk about some of the specific kinds of things event photographers take pictures of. And I'd say, you know, one of the most high profile ones is there's almost always an awards night. So there's always what we call a grip and grin. For people who don't know, what is a grip and grin, Mike?
Well, as the name would imply, the photo subjects are aware of the camera. They're looking at the camera, and they're usually waiting for you to take the photo and give them some kind of signal that you're finished. That could just be the flash going off or what have you. But it's the subjects are aware. They're shaking hands generally, or passing an award, and looking right at the camera, as opposed to a candid photo. Okay,
so that's it's the handshake moment. You got an award in one hand, the CEO's hand in the other, and it's the big pose, and everybody likes to get those. That can happen either on stage, right there where they're being presented, or sometimes they get the award and they go off to the side, and there's an area set up, and they both, for the photograph, and those can both have their pros and cons. Larry, what's your preference? What would you prefer? What would you prefer that to be?
Well, it depends on the size of the event. I mean, a lot of my events are major, large annual meetings, and there's a big general session stage that's lit for a rock and roll show. So obviously that's much better for me. That's more advantageous for myself, because it's lit properly. And there's a big stage and there's lots of room, and you can gather lots of people together. However, in a corporate environment, you may not have a big stage. It may not be lit, or if it is lit, it's lit poorly, or it could be just a little square section of a staging with a podium on it. Or there could be a head table where there's really not any room to gather people together. Then you have to kind of control your environment. A lot of clients will ask, or you can certainly make sure that there's a step and repeat in front of them, so that you've got a background versus, a hotel or convention center wall. And then you've got to, then you bring in some lights and control that environment, and away you go.
Okay. Mike, what are your thoughts on stage photography or grip and grin off stage?
As Larry mentioned, controlling your environment is key, and if you can do that off stage, then I would prefer that, especially for larger groups where they might take a little longer to pose, or just to make sure they all look good, lined up in the right spot, etc. If you're doing that on stage in front of hundreds of people, and that could be a little bit iffy and stressful for everybody involved. So if you can take that stress away by moving off stage, and you have a little bit more time and you can control your light.
Yeah. Something that I've seen happen before, and when there's time to do this, it's really beneficial, is to, once you've got the place on stage marked where the people are going to stand, and you, the photographer, have a pretty good idea where you're going to stand, you can work with the graphics person on site and develop a specific PowerPoint slide that creates the right background. You can position the winner's name and the category in a certain place, or the company's logo, or whatever, so that you've got a great built-in background, and everyone's got that great picture of themselves on stage with the CEO, their name behind them, So it can really be something that's something good to work out in advance if it's possible.
Absolutely.
The person that you find yourself becoming either friends or enemies with, I think, can be someone who's doing the same thing you are, but with a video camera. You're both down front, fighting for territory. What's the best way to manage that, Larry?
Well, I mean, it's kind of, and again, we talked about, it's kind of a, Hatfield McCoy, we're always in each other's way, or we're trying to stay out of the way. Obviously, we're a little more mobile. A lot of times, and you might have a handheld camera, and he's pretty much static, or his footprint is very small. So you just kind of have to be aware of, because obviously the last thing you want, especially in an environment where they're doing an IMAG, and you don't want to see the back of your head on a screen. So you just you got to play nicely, and you got to make sure you're aware where they're at, and they got to make sure you're aware, and introduce yourself and say, hey, you just let me know if I'm in your way. You let me know, or tap me on the shoulder, and because once I start shooting, I'm kind of focused on what I'm trying to do, and I could step in the way. So if it looks like I'm going to get in your way, just don't be afraid to stop, because I'm not taking moving images. I can stop, back up, and still get my shot. Versus video, it's obviously live. So you just gotta play fair. Gotta try to play fair.
Sure, Mike.
Yeah, I like to find the video folks beforehand, and have a little conversation about positioning, and just kind of get on the same page and make sure we're not going to be in each other's way. I think that's the best way to do it, so there are no surprises. Things could happen spontaneously, and there could be a little surprise, but if you've already had a chance to talk with that person, you can get along well and just roll with it.
Good. What's the benefit? I can almost figure this out myself, but I'd like to hear your perspective. What is the benefit to bringing a photographer in early and being part of the rehearsals? I know sometimes you guys are asked to be there at a certain time, and you realize that they've just scheduled you to be there when the thing starts. So if you can be there early, what are the advantages of getting to be part of the rehearsals?
I think being there early to figure out the light, to make sure the light is going to be sufficient, to make sure that, it always comes back to light for me, because with poor lighting, that can really make your job very difficult. It can make some images unusable after the fact if the stage is really poorly lit. And maybe you're not allowed to use a flash. It depends on what the guidelines are. Poorly lit photos can also create a lot of post-production time afterwards, which is not going to help with the photo turnaround time either. So get there early, be part of the rehearsal if you can. Look at the stage lighting. The client can also point out people who you need to know, important people who you will want to photograph later, but you might not necessarily know what they look like. Maybe client can point those people out for you as well at that time.
Good. Larry, what are some of the things you can accomplish if you have an opportunity to be there 3 hours early?
Well, Mike, exactly. You get your environment, you get lighting, it's show ready. It's also a good chance to get those kind of shots that you wouldn't be able to get because you can get on the stage. I like to tend to. You also gotta keep in mind that these guys, a lot of your speakers aren't necessarily used to this environment, and they're certainly not used to having someone taking their photograph kind of nonstop, and especially in a big tent or a big general session environment. So I like to try to introduce myself to the gentleman, whoever the doctor is, whoever she or he might be. Let them know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be up there taking your picture. You're going to be a rock star. I'm going to make you look like a rock star. And I'm going to get up on stage with you, because that way, and then that gives you the opportunity to get those kind of fun little shots that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get when the program's going on. Having him, be right over his shoulder, and him looking out over the house, and the stage lights are shining on him. That rock and roll shot that we've all seen. Mm-hmm. Then you can obviously get real close and get some of those fun shots. And then when the show is going on, then you do your normal establishing shots. But it makes them, it helps them get comfortable with a guy with a camera in their face. And because that's what I'm here for. And the reason I'm here is because you're important enough to be on this stage, and this is going to be great. You'll see it'll be great. You'll do great. Everything will be terrific. And then they get used to it. And then, they tend to do these things over and over and over. And then you become friends. You're like a once a year friend. It's like, oh my God, here's my photo guy. and
Yeah.
say, okay, Doc, here we go. Or whoever the speaker might be.
Well, I mean, it's a good point to have the chance to introduce yourself to the people who you're going to be taking pictures of, because as opposed to some stranger running up to them with a camera, oh, this is somebody I know. Okay, hi, Larry. So it's
Right.
you know, it's just kind of creates better, friendlier pictures.
Absolutely.
Also, I was just thinking, getting there early gives you a chance to walk the venue, and you walk into the general session room and you go, okay, this is a big ballroom, I got this. And then somebody goes, oh, but right after this, we're all going to a mixer. And so you get a chance to go look at that room. Oh, I better go back to my car and get whatever else, whatever lights because Mike, you've, as you know, sometimes you're not just taking pictures in one place. It's your studio is the entire convention center.
Exactly, and different rooms require different lenses, different lighting, etc. So different cameras even. So knowing all of that stuff ahead of time is very useful, and that way you're not running back to your staging area or wherever they have you situated to grab a lens or to grab another camera bag or whatever. So knowing the lay of the land certainly is important.
It also helps with your schedule. If you got a schedule early enough, then you know where you're going, so you're not looking for a room. You're not, and it's a good chance, and Microphone said the same thing, it's a good chance to get those establishing shots of signage, and when, there's not 9 million people around,
Yep.
you can pick the signage and you can get your establishment, your documentation stuff out of the way, because when you're running around, it's one of the things you kind of forget about, or your, the setup or the exhibit floor setting up and all that kind of fun stuff. That's good to have, and it's good to, you're doing a lot of work. You're just not shooting a lot of people at it. This is
Good. Yeah, good point. So a lot to think about, and just the overriding theme, I guess, of our webinar today is don't forget about the photographer. Love your photographer.
right.
Get out of their way. Help them as much as you can.
Right.
Would you say the photographer is the most important person at any convention, at any event, Mike?
I'm
just kidding.
I don't know about the most important person, but an important person for sure. Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Absolutely.
Just see, all right, good.
Absolutely. Can't live without me.
All the photographers out there are cheering.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so that's award photography, the main event. But there's a lot of other things to take pictures of, and one of them is happy faces. People love to see themselves and create that scrapbook. And there's a lot of different uses for those. A lot of times, as being part of the production team myself, I'm in charge of making sure I get all those happy faces, all those candid pictures to create a slideshow, and the end of the event video slideshow. So this is a whole topic, getting happy face candid shots. Larry, initial thoughts on that?
Well, as I mentioned before, the dynamic as far as event photography is, in my world, as far as a convention atmosphere, is shifting to the social media. And initially when I first got into this, you're shooting for the executive director or whoever, and they take your photographs and they put them in a file somewhere, or they put them somewhere and they stay. Well, now I don't shoot for those people. Obviously I've got a boss, an executive director who hired me, but I'm working with the marketing people and the social media people and all those and the graphics folks, all those kind of people that are creating the look of the next year's convention. So they take those happy face, not only did they use it the next year for video rolls or intros for the general session, but they also use them for signage and for registration signs and the booths and all that kind of stuff. That's what they use as far as the happy person that's shaking hands or interaction, or the exhibit floor is a gold mine for that kind of stuff. You've got people interested in whatever the product might be. And I'm starting to see more and more and more my work showing up on the side of a building versus stuffed away somewhere. And, are they use them for, the end of the year annual report and all those kind of things, which initially I never saw. It was kind of a joke, not a joke, but, the pictures, I'd send them away to the client and never see them again. Well, now I am. Now it's all about that. Again, the dynamic is shifting with respect to what they use them for.
Larry, you might be right. The photographer might be the most important person.
Just saying, just throwing it out there.
Because there's a lot of uses, yeah. And as you say, that's just another one is for the webpage. Hey, look at all these people having a great time at last year's conference. Don't forget to register for next year's. Look how much fun they're having.
Right.
Mike, what do you have this happen a lot where someone's going to, hey, when you're getting pictures, we definitely want a picture of this person, this person, and this person. And how do you know who those people are? I mean, does somebody go with you? Do they give you a show you, here's a picture of a guy? How do you know what to do?
That's a great question because it happens all the time. You need photos of specific people, but you've never seen them before. Unless it's the keynote speaker or a celebrity or what have you, you might not know who that person is. So my favorite thing to do is ask for an assistant from the client, somebody that the client provides me who knows all those people, who can walk with me and point out certain people, and sometimes even make an introduction if that's required. If that person's involved in a conversation, you might shoot that candidly, but they also might want some posed stuff, and then my assistant can go over and kind of make that introduction, and it's a lot easier to do it that way. Sometimes if they want these photos for media, newspaper, what have you, we need to ID those people in the photos, or sometimes the publication won't even use them. So it's easier to ID those people when you have an assistant with you as well. So that's also something to think about.
How do you, is there a way to tag a hero picture? You're taking thousands of pictures throughout the course of the night and you go, oh, that's an important one. Larry, how do you shuffle that one off to the side and put it in a folder somewhere on the camera? How does that work?
Well, no, it's the workflow, you've got to develop your own workflow. And I'm sure Mike's got one. I've got my own set of workflow where I put everything on it. You've got to be religious about putting everything where it needs to go at the end of each day, because the next day is a whole brand new day. And so as you're going through, and if you're doing this long enough, you catch a picture, and because of technology and science, we can see it in the back of our camera. And so sometimes you will catch a photograph that you look at and go, huh, and you kind of remember that one, and then you get back to your desk and look at it and it's correct. But the one before to the one after to the one that you had no idea that was going to be any good turns out to be the one, to where the light's great and the guys' expressions are great and they're looking at each other in the eye, and there's a connection between the two people, and you manage to catch that, and you get lucky. You get real lucky. And that's, sometimes you can plan a lot of that stuff, and as you do this long enough, you start looking for that kind of interaction kind of thing, and you can plan it. And a lot of times you get really lucky.
This might be a dumb question, but let's say it is a dumb question. Maybe it's not. Is there technology on today's cameras, and I just don't know this, where do cameras have Wi-Fi access and you got a great shot and you've got the event planner's email address? Can you send something directly to somebody? Here's that
Yes,
shot
sir.
you're looking for. Is there a way to do that?
Yes, sir. Again, sorry if I'm jumping in front of Mike, but everything around these events all swings around as far as the social media, and Michael's talking about celebrities and having the right badge. If you've got a celebrity and you don't have the right badge, you can't get to that celebrity to take his photograph. Or if you're working an event and the President of the United States is scheduled to show up, which is a whole nother level of security, a whole nother level of badge. But to answer your question, and it's all about social media again. I've got a new digital mirrorless camera that will send a 2 meg file to my phone that I can edit on my phone using Photoshop and Lightroom, and then I can send that photograph to the social media person, and they can post it within 5 minutes. I can be in a general session or meeting room, step back, lean against the wall, boom, 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 send it to them, and it's like you've invented fire. It's magic.
Mike, how do you solve that instant send issue?
I'm aware of the technology that Larry's talking about. I haven't personally used it yet. Currently, the way I do things is, I'll have my laptop with me, and I'll have a room given to me by a client. Hopefully it's a room. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a storage closet. You just never know where you're going to be with your laptop.
Hat check room.
Yeah. Sometimes you're sharing a small room with the caterer, and your laptop is on a food crate or something like that. So I'll edit on my laptop, and then I'll email my contact person, or maybe we've created a Dropbox folder ahead of time, and I'm just dumping photos into that Dropbox, and and my client is receiving them that way during the event.
We talked about, rushing up to the CEO or some of the leadership team or people of note with a camera, and maybe they don't know who you are. Are there issues of getting a photo release in advance, or do people know who you are? How do you solve that? Because a lot of times, there's not an introduction. Suddenly somebody's going, "Who's this guy taking my picture?" Mike?
Well, generally that person has, signed something, when they registered for the event. So I never really have to deal with photo releases directly myself. Perhaps the client's done it ahead of time, but I've never had to deal with that, luckily, because that would just confuse things even more.
Yeah. Larry?
I know I haven't either. I had a client that wanted me to, and that quickly went away in about 10 minutes. Because you can't, there's no way that you're going to stop someone. Do you mind if I take this natural candid picture of you and your colleague talking about your subject? Can you sign this and then continue on? It's not going to, it doesn't work.
And people are used to, they see your badge. It's probably really not an issue.
Well, also, you're also the guy walking around with 3 cameras around his neck.
Yeah.
That tends to help. They kind of figure out, and you're in black.
That lends you a little bit of credibility. You're not just some crazed street person who's rushed in with $5,000 worth of cameras.
I've seen signage at events, before you walk in a room that, you will possibly be photographed in this room. I've seen that before too.
I have too.
Most people aren't surprised.
Another kind of photography at these kinds of events is in the trade show on the exhibit floor. And that can be a huge job all by itself, because sometimes they go, "Hey, we want a picture of every booth." Does that ever happen? That's pretty unrealistic. Do you ever get that assignment?
They usually want a photograph of setup, a random setup, and depending on the convention center, there's usually a room that you can get high above, and then I can use like a fisheye or wide angle lens and get a photograph or stitch something together that shows the entire, pre-production kind of setup shot and then a final shot. I've never been asked to shoot every single booth. I certainly could. Depending on the size of the convention, as the official photographer for whatever association I'm shooting for, I have the opportunity to provide my services to the exhibitors, and I tend to get, and they hire me separately, and the association will give me an after hours time after the exhibit floor is closed to photograph particular booths that they've hired me for, but I've never had to shoot every single booth. A lot of these floors are huge.
Yeah, that's true. Mike, Larry, I'm going to get back to you on this as well, because Larry mentioned specifically being asked by different exhibitors to get pictures. Do you ever get just kind of on the fly? They're going, "Hey, there's a photographer here. We got this new product. Can you take a picture of our new product for our catalog?" Suddenly you're being asked, how do you, what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah. So you just kind of explain, well, I'm taking these photos today for this client, and these photos are going to that client. So if you would like to obtain any of these images, you can go through them. There's no guarantee if I take your picture, you're ever going to see the photo. If you want to work something out for afterwards, on a different day, or like Larry said, after the show, as a side job, if the client allows for that, then sure, that's something that we can do. But you can't just go around taking requests from people who are not your direct client and your direct contact person.
Right. Larry, have you ever had an experience with that, with people going, "Hey, we got a photographer here, let's get some pictures"?
Yes. Usually my form ends up in the exhibitor packet prior to, so that gives them the opportunity to call. And then they also, depending on the size of the association, will give me like a service desk on the floor, which I'm never there, but I'll put a sign-in sheet, like if you need, or call me and I'll come by and talk to you about it and give you a form. If you want to do it, then here's a form, and I can certainly work, put you in my list to do. A lot of times when you're in the meeting itself, the meeting floor itself, there'll be a group that will say, "Hey, can you come by and take a photograph of our reception?" And then my snap answer is, you have to run it by the executive director, because that's our XYZ person who I'm working for. And if they give me permission, then I'd be happy to come by. I can't do that just on my own. Or you'll get you'll get stopped and there'll be a group of people just in the hallway. Can you take our picture? Yes. Can I get it? Yes, but you need to call this person or talk to this person, and you may never get it, but you might. And then I'll take the photograph and let somebody know that, oh, by the way, I took this picture. If you want to give it to them, then it's up to them. It's not my call. None of this stuff would be my call.
Right.
Yeah. Mike, any other thoughts on that?
No, I agree with everything Larry just said. I mean, I'll take the photo if it's not really interfering with what I'm supposed to be doing. I can't be distracted from my main goal. But if I can do it, I'm happy to do it. They may never see it, like Larry said, but I'm happy to do it, turn it over to the client, and then it's up to them at that point. I'm out of the process at that point.
Right.
Gotcha. One of the unique situations that, let's just say annual conferences allow is that everyone who is, works in all the offices all over the country, they're all in one place at one time. They're all dressed nice. It's a great opportunity to update for the website, say the leadership portraits. Does that ever happen? Well, first of all, have you ever been asked to do that? Hey, we gotta, let's get pictures of all our leadership staff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time to do it, as you say. Normally we would just set up a little studio on the side or in a different room and have the people come in at a predetermined time. Something you can work into the deal with the client if there's time to do it. It's a great idea for all involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's a win-win.
Larry, have you been asked to do that?
Absolutely. And again, I keep referring back to some of the larger meetings that I shoot. A lot of those events are prior to the actual meeting starting, like the past president or executive directors or the executive board or committee heads or whatever. And so then that's on my shot list. And then I will go by at a break, a lunch break or something. And then usually, and Mike was referring to having someone, you got to have someone within the organization or the staff that's kind of your person to pull all these people together, because you're trying to do a lot of things at the same time, capture the shot, get your lighting right and all that kind of stuff, but you got to be able to pull all these people together or make sure everybody's there that needs to be in the photograph. It could be Dr. Bill that I don't know from Adam's Tomcat, but really needs to be in the photograph, and he could have walked away and he's on his phone or gone to the restroom or whatever, and somebody needs a head count. It's like, wait, we're missing Bill. Where's Bill? And then somebody needs to go find Bill that knows who Bill is. I don't.
Cool.
But a lot of that stuff happens prior to. Yes, absolutely, and it's part of the deal. Or like the president's dinner. That's a good opportunity to do a lot of that stuff, which is on my shot list.
Why did you choose the name Bill as the person who was missing and couldn't be found?
It's okay, Mike. Because I'm looking right at you. I don't know.
All right, I'm kidding.
Steve.
Now, would it be appropriate for the industrious photographer if the topic of executive portraits had not been brought up to suggest, hey, I can bring a backdrop, and for this extra much money, we can take pictures? Would that be, is that cool?
I think it's case-by-case basis, depending on, why you're there in the first place and, what the event is and even who the client is. But I've done it, and the client has appreciated it, and they have appreciated that. There have been times when I haven't done it. I've chosen not to bring that up just because it just didn't feel right. And it's just one of those things where, you kind of have to make the call. And if you know the client well, it's an easier call. If you've never worked with them before and they seem stressed out about the whole event, you might not want to introduce one more thing for them to worry about. So it's just one of those things where you kind of take it by the job and decide case by case.
Yeah.
100%. A lot of these guys, it's kind of what's cool at the moment. And because it's a small world, and a lot of these folks know each other through industry functions or PCMA or whatever it might be. And they talk about stuff, or someone will attend that's, a past president or on the board of directors or something had gone to a similar convention within their field and saw something, and they bring it back and say, hey, I went to XYZ meeting, and you know what they're doing? They're doing this. Something that I'm starting to see crop up more and more is they'll set up a little photo booth on the exhibit floor for the attendees. It's kind of a fun thing that gives them a photograph that they desperately need because it's not a selfie. And so that's kind of a goodwill thing for the association And it's another quote unquote thing for me to do, a revenue stream such as it is. Also, I always set up and I'm just like what Mike was saying, I'll set up a backdrop and a couple lights on sticks and leave it backstage at the general session, because a lot of times they'll need photographs, or they'll need a fresh photograph of, again, Dr. Bill, who's getting ready to go on, and the photograph they have is 15 years old. And then when they walk up, it doesn't look like Dr. Bill. It looks like Dr. Bill 15 years ago. So then it's a great opportunity to take a fresh photograph to use for the intro slide. Or the production team may come to you and say, hey, we've got this photograph of Dr. Nairn or Dr. whoever, and it's 1,000 years old. Oh my gosh, we got to get something fresh. Can we take his photograph? Well, then I've got a little area. It's like, come on, Doc, come stand right here, turn to the right, look this way, bang, 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 and I can bang it out quickly and give it to the production staff. And now they've got something. And again, it all turns around. It's one big circle. Because of the new technology and science, I can literally do it and email it to them from my camera.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of
It's,
go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's also nice to have that uniform background for all of the executives or all of the people, because how many times have you seen headshots on a website or wherever where they were clearly taken in front of different backgrounds, different photographers, different lighting? They don't really gel together nicely. So if you get all those people with the same background, the same lighting, same photographer, the same style, and now you put all those images together on a website or in a brochure, they're going to look really professional and really tight.
Correct.
Yeah, good. Well, Larry,
it's a business. We're trying to add value to our service, and consistency is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Mike's absolutely correct.
Well, yeah, you mentioned something, Larry, that I was going to bring up, because I've seen recently at events where I think it's a great service. They just set up a little station, and sometimes it's the photographer's assistant doing it while the photographer's doing some of the more main stuff. They've got a little social media station, and everyone gets in line, and everyone's already dressed up for the award event or the social, for the mixer or whatever, and they give the photographer their email address, and they've got a nice professional picture for their social media, instead of some shot from their laptop looking up their chin and everything. So it's a great service.
Absolutely. I'm doing it for actually the very first time this fall, knock on wood that we have a fall. And we're doing the same thing. And on top of that, because it's the new millennium and I found this guy that did a program to where we can actually, after they take the photograph within the same day, we'll email them the photograph. So they'll be walking around the convention center or walking around the meeting, and they'll get an email from Larry Young Photos, and boom, there's their photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Science.
Okay. Mike, the selfie. Who are these competitive photographers taking pictures with their iPhones when you're trying to make a living at it?
It's a great question.
Amateurs.
Yeah, I don't know. What's the question?
I don't know. I just thought I might goad you into complaining a little bit.
I mean, you see selfie stations sometimes at the events, which these are popular nowadays. We have nothing to do with that. Client has set it up, usually with a different company. The attendees seem to love it, and doesn't bother me any. It doesn't really interfere with what I'm doing. But yeah. I don't have a whole lot of experience with those stations or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of.
Yeah,
I was just messing with you. Anything else? Anything else we've forgotten to talk about, or we should? If you let's say, let's do this one at a time. I'll ask the question, and then whoever wants to do it first, and the other person can think about it. This is your opportunity. You've got clients listening, potential clients, meeting planners. What's the one thing as the photographer, you'd like to say to them? Say, hey, you always forget to do this, or can we get this straightened out? Mike?
I would like to say, keep us in the loop. We can deal with things if we find things out at the last minute. We can adapt. We're smart, but keep us in the loop, because the earlier we know things, the better. Show us a shot list. What do you want, and when do you want it? Who are we photographing? All these things that seem obvious sometimes are overlooked by the planners, because again, they're so busy. So just keep us in the loop early, if possible.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, the shot list is key. That way we can see if we have to be in two places at the same time. Bill, you alluded to, oh, just go out and you know what we want. No, I don't. Honestly, I don't. Tell me exactly what you want. It's much easier. If you tell me what you want, I'll get it for you. A lot of times you get, that stuff that you usually do. No, ma'am. No, sir. You tell me exactly what you want. That's exactly what you'll get. Because you don't want at the end of the day when you can't get it, it's like, oh, well, what I really meant was, of course, then you can't tell your clients, well, why didn't you just tell me that? So if you just tell me what you want. And that's where, and again, the change, shooting or dealing with marketing or social media or creative graphics people, they're very specific as far as I want this. Perfect. Thank you very much. Boom, I'm off to the races.
Yeah.
That's a big deal with me is just tell me exactly what you want. Where do I need to be? What time? And what do you want me to shoot? And I got it.
I would also point out that that's 100% true. Like there are certain jobs I go on, maybe it's not a corporate event, where I don't want to be micromanaged so much because people are hiring me for my creativity and my eye and how I see things and how I see the light and how I see art. But at a corporate event, at a live event, I'm not really offended if the client is micromanaging me to an extent or sending me around with an assistant. Make sure you get X, Y, Z. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that image, it's my fault. If that image isn't there, it's my fault. So it's up to me to communicate early with the client, and hopefully they provide that shot list and everything. But it's fine with me if they're kind of like, hey, Mike, did you get this? Did you get that? Make sure you get this. That's okay with me. And then when that's not happening, there are times when you can let your creativity seep into the job and maybe surprise the client a little bit with something they weren't expecting. And they'll appreciate that. But that's all bonus stuff. I mean, you need to get the XYZ that they want.
So we have, let's do a couple of questions that have come in. One, okay, well, this isn't really a question, but this is probably from a photographer out there. Talk about asking for workspace at an event. I think I know what that means, but Mike, we'll start with you.
So it's important to have a place to not only to put your gear. You're coming to these events with a lot of gear, a lot of cameras, backup cameras, lenses, backup lenses, lighting, laptop. You need a place to store that, a safe place. But it's also nice to kind of be near others who, if they say something that you need to hear, you're going to hear it. If you're off in a broom closet down the hall, you're going to be out of the loop and you might miss something. And ultimately that's your fault, even though it's not your fault, even though it wasn't your decision to work down the hall. So it's important to communicate with the client. Hey, we need a place to work. It needs to be near everyone else, and it needs to have Wi-Fi. It needs to have all the things we need, power and security for our equipment when we're not there even. We're going to leave $10,000 worth of gear in a room. We need to make sure it's safe. So all these things are important. I've had workspaces that were really, really good, and I've had some that were just terrible. And I think I mentioned earlier in this webinar that, I've had times when, I was sharing a room with the caterers or the kitchen staff, and you get by, but it's not ideal. So,
Larry, what's the minimum for a usable workspace?
A table, power, and internet, and security. Because, and Mike's exactly correct. I mean, you're running around and you're just leaving your entire world sitting on a table. If you lost any of that stuff, you're done. You're out of business. And you just walk out of a room with your camera gear basically laying there, or especially if you get somebody comes in and says, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you about such and such. Can you run over to room 103 and grab that for me real quick? Grab a shot of that. And then you take off. And Mike's right. A lot of times they'll put me in like the show office. And so it's also good to be there where things are going around and you're listening to people and everybody's there and they're not looking for you, and you're just kind of there. You're just kind of the fly on the wall and you listen to stuff. And that way you can, you can ask, do I need to go take a photograph of that? Do you need that? It's like, no, I'm good. Or yeah, good idea. I forgot. Yeah, that might not be a bad idea. So, secure, but minimum table, internet, power, and someplace secure. It's our little home for the week. This is where we're going to live for a week.
Yeah, and I was going to say, definitely don't hesitate to ask, because as someone who's been on part of the production team, there's almost always someplace somewhere. And if we'd known you wanted it or had, been reminded, that's helpful. Because yeah, the show office, as you mentioned, Larry, is the perfect place. It's nearby. Someone's always there. It's got internet. It's got power, and you're right close to the client, and you just kind of stay in touch with them. So that's really the ideal place. Okay. How important is an assistant? Sometimes we work with photographers who ask for an assistant, but it costs more money. So I guess they're asking, if a photographer asks for assistance, is that really an important thing, or are they just padding the budget? I mean, have you had a chance to work with an assistant? I know the money's not always there.
I do work with assistants from time to time. It's not the norm, because typically the client doesn't want to pay for it. But I do explain, and sometimes I can't blame them. They have a budget. But in a perfect world, there will be an assistant, especially if I need to be in two places at once. So I need to explain to the client, hey, I can't be in this room and this room at the same time. I really strongly recommend that you make room in the budget for another photographer. Or sometimes it's nice just to have somebody to run back to the office and grab a light or something that you forgot, or to get food. I mean, any of these things can be useful. Can we work without one? Definitely. I do it all the time. Does it help a lot if we can have one? Yeah, it does. It does help, especially if we need to be in two places at once. I think that's the biggest factor.
Yeah. Larry?
100%. When I first started, you're trying to get business, and so I picked up a lot of shoots, or several shoots, just because it was me and I didn't have a big staff. So maybe I'm just not smart enough to realize I need help, but that's kind of my workflow. So I kind of do it myself. That's where obviously the shot list comes in handy. So you can see whether you have to be in two places at once. And if it's just you, then there's a priority thing. What's more important, this room or that room, kind of thing, which happens sometimes. So I don't tend to work with an assistant. Yeah, it would be great, but again, because we're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, budgets are budgets, and it's, if it's a traveling show, it's a hotel room, it's an airfare, and all those things kind of add up. And so you don't want to risk the job. If you need one, you need one, obviously, but you're trying to maintain your business, trying to do the repeat stuff, obviously.
Okay. So an assistant is a nice luxury, not required, but
yes.
It's not money wasted. And you'd probably maybe get more pictures, the photographer's taking more pictures and having you do less of the busy work, running back and forth to their van.
And it's also an interesting, like Mike and I can shoot the same event, exactly the same event, and we're going to come up with a different look just because. So that could be an advantage, having a different viewpoint, but.
That's a great point, Larry, because, we are seeing things differently. And we're also backing each other up. If Larry misses a shot, or if I miss a shot, right, the other one's going to have it. And if it's a key moment, you're going to want it. So I think it's kind of up to us to explain to the client, what all the advantages are of having an assistant, backing each other up, two perspectives, be in two rooms at once, explain it to them and see if they want to make room for it in their budget. If they do, great. If not, at least you explained it ahead of time.
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, thank you, Larry Young, photographer of the Great Southwest and the world. Mike Buscher, photographer of the Great Northeast, the Eastern Seaboard. Thanks for all your work. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks everyone for logging in and being part of this webinar of Photography in Focus, Event Photography, Manor Hill Productions Live. Thanks for logging in. And as we're winding down, stay on the webinar for just a few seconds after we wrap, because you'll have an opportunity to respond to a questionnaire, which we'd like to get your feedback on, and maybe get suggestions for future topics. This is an organic webinar driven by what you want to learn about and what we'd like to talk about. So let us know how we can help. And please be sure to go to manorhill.com. That's manor-hill.com to learn about all of the things that Manor Hill Productions does in the live event industry, how we could help your event, and see past webinars, learn about upcoming ones, and again, make suggestions for stuff you'd like us to talk about. So thanks everyone for logging in. Larry and Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill.
All right.
Thank you to Manor Hill Productions.
Stay in touch, and we'll see you. Thank you.